I hope you guys are ready because we're going to go over 7 rules for becoming a freight broker millionaire. All right. Now, I said to you before that my journey to become a millionaire did not happen overnight. It took many, many years. I started my first business over 25 years ago. Since then, I've been very blessed, done over $200 million as an entrepreneur, but it took a long time to figure out the ropes. I made tons of mistakes along the way. And so I'm going to share with you these 7 lessons. Here we go. Lesson number 1. Lesson number 1 is you need to understand 2 very important business terms, and one is called CAC and one is called LTV. CAC stands for customer acquisition cost. That is the cost that it acquires, that a company invests or pays to acquire a customer. So as a freight broker, there's a cost to acquire a company. Usually that cost is in time and energy and resources to acquire that customer. The second part of that, LTV, stands for lifetime value, right? What is the lifetime value of a client? For example, if you do $100,000 in revenue with a client per year and you have that client for 6 years, that lifetime value of that client is $600,000, right? So the math equation, your customer acquisition cost is very relative to your lifetime value. So perfect example. Here's a question for you. Would you invest, this is just a hypothetical, would you invest $10,000 to get back $600,000 in revenue? Simple question, right? Because on that $600,000 in revenue as a typical broker, you're probably making at or around 15%. And I'm not very good at math, but that's over $900,000, or that's $90,000 in profit, right? So would you trade $10,000 to acquire a customer to make $90,000 over the lifetime of that client? Probably, right? That's a 9 times return on investment. There's a gentleman, a well-known entrepreneur, copywriter, author by the name of Dan Kennedy, who coined the phrase, something along the lines, whoever can spend the most to acquire a customer is the winner, right? The company that's willing to invest the most to acquire a customer will always win. Something along those lines. And he was a very successful entrepreneur. What he meant was, if you are willing to invest time, energy, and resource to acquire a good customer that has a strong lifetime value, you can win. You will win. And in the freight brokerage business, the great part about it is it's repeat and referral business, right? You're not going to do just one load with a shipper. You're going to do 1 load a week, 1 load a month, 1 load a day. You're going to do regular shipments with most shippers because most shipments are recurring when you're in as a freight broker selling commercial freight, right? So the first rule is understanding CAC, which is customer acquisition cost. And the second term there is LTV, lifetime value. That's rule number 1. You have to understand those. That's a fundamental business principle that you need to understand. All right. Number 2, under promise and over deliver. If you've been following me for any amount of time, you have probably heard this, right? This is a core tenet. This is a core value that I have. Again, most young entrepreneurs do the exact opposite. They overpromise and underdeliver. The problem with that is that in order to succeed as a business, you have to get repeat and referral business. If you don't get that, it's going to be very hard to build a sustainable, long-term, profitable business. And so repeat and referral business is powerful, but it's only going to work if you have happy customers. And so my philosophy has always been under promise, over deliver, right? You want them to be surprised at the level of service that you provided for them. And so ultimately, again, because repeat and referral business is so important, under promise, over deliver is critical because you can never undo a bad reputation, right? With the internet the way it is, social media the way it is, if you're not delivering at a very high level, other people are going to know about it if you have unhappy customers. So make sure that you understand and you follow the principle of under promise, over deliver. That's rule number 2. Rule number 3 is to diversify your customer base. Now, this should go without saying, but I've seen many a broker who has went out, landed a big client, and then sat back on their laurels collecting checks and making a lot of money. I remember having an agent of mine years ago that landed a very big client. He was doing over $1 million a year with that client, making really good margins, making a lot of money. And he didn't diversify his customer base, even though I pounded him over the head with it. And then eventually he lost that client and his business went from 7 figures to 0 almost overnight. And it almost caused him to go bankrupt. He almost lost everything he had because he didn't diversify his customer base. And so I've seen too many businesses in the freight logistics industry, as well as other industries, that are too beholden to 2 or 3 or 4 big customers, and they don't diversify their customer base. Now, when I launched my brokerage, I knew that I had no intentions of living and dying by a few customers. So I took more of a mutual fund approach. I highly diversified our customer base. And I tell the story that when I sold the company in 2016, we were doing over 80 million in sales. And I think at that time, the largest individual client that we had was doing 5 or 6% of our revenue, right? So while that would hurt if we lost that client, it wouldn't put us out of business, right? It wasn't going to set things upside down. We were not going to be in financial straits just because we lost 1 or 2 clients. And again, the largest client out of that maybe did 5 or 6%. So diversifying your customer base is critically important, right? I've seen too many freight brokers and freight agents, go down because they did not diversify their customer base. That's rule number 2. Or actually rule number 3. I'm sorry. That's number 3. Number 4. Learn how to save when you don't have any money. All right. So when you're broke, if you're broke right now, right, or you're not where you want to be financially, learn how to save money now. Because if you can't save $10 out of 100, I promise you, you're not going to save 1,000 out of 10,000. It won't happen. You need to develop that habit. You need to develop that muscle. You need to develop that system for saving money. And I'm not saying that you have to save, you've got expenses, you've got personal expenses, you've got other things that you've got to pay for, the rent and the groceries and the light bill and the cable bill and all these other bills that you have. I understand you've got bills, but I also understand that you should be able to save $10 out of 100, right? Because if you learn how to pay yourself first, that's the important rule, right? So learning how to save when you have no money is an incredibly valuable skill. I'm going to refer you to a book. It's called The Richest Man in Babylon. This had a huge impact on me when I was a young entrepreneur. I read it in my 20s, and I have never forgot that book. As a matter of fact, I probably read it again when I was in my late 30s. I haven't read it since. I probably should, even though I'm a really good saver. It will really help you. The Richest Man in Babylon. So that's number 4. Learn how to save when you don't have any money. Okay. Number 5, don't buy dumb shit. Sorry to be so bold and so brass about it, but ultimately you don't need Rolexes. You don't need fancy watches and fancy suits and fancy cars and fancy shoes and fancy houses. Listen, I promise you that if you buy all those things, you will go broke. All right. I've done it. I've made all those mistakes. I'm speaking from experience. I've made tons of mistakes with money when I was a young entrepreneur, but I learned from those mistakes and I built on those mistakes, right? I don't know the exact quote, but Warren Buffett said something to the effect, if you buy things you don't need, eventually you'll have to sell things that you do need, right? I think that's the actual quote. That's pretty good. I pulled that out of nowhere. Warren Buffett, remember this quote, if you buy things you don't need, eventually you'll have to sell things that you do need. So my rule number 5, don't buy dumb shit. Promise you, I've made that mistake. I've bought all kinds of dumb shit when I was a young entrepreneur. Don't make that mistake. Don't fall into that trap. Okay. So that's rule number 5. Number 6, right? Number 6, start a retirement account now. If you don't already have it, even if you don't have any money to put in it, get that account started now, whether that be an IRA or a Roth or a 401k. Get that retirement account started now. the power and it's almost like it's almost like a magic trick, right? The power of compounding interest, right? There's that example. I'm going to ask you a quick question. Would you rather have $1 million cash? I have $1 million cash in this hand that I'll give you, right? Or would you rather have a penny that doubles every day for 30 days? Which would you rather have? In this hand, in my first hand, my right hand, we've got $1 million. I'll hand it to you. Or in my left hand, I'll give you the results of a penny that doubles every day for 30 days. Now, I'm going to save you the looking it up on Google. The fact is, you want my left hand. You want the penny a day that doubles for 30 days. Why? Because at the end of that, I think you'll have over $5 million. That's the power of compounding interest. The younger you are, the easier it is to become a millionaire if you start saving today. And I'm not talking about you having to make 6 or 7 figures in order to become a millionaire. You can become a millionaire making $30,000 or $40,000 if you invest, if you have a systematic way of investing and compounding your interest. Okay. So number 6 is start a retirement account today. Number 7, you need to learn, this is rule number 7. Okay. You need to learn how to manage your finances. So the ability, not only as a business, you need to learn how to manage your finances, but as an individual person, you need to learn how to manage your finances. You need to learn how to manage the incoming and outgoing money out of all of your accounts. Now, I can't teach you that today, and that's not something you're going to learn in 5 minutes. But you can learn this over time. It's not that complicated of a principle. And I'm going to refer you to a resource that I think will really, really help you and really helped me, even in the recent past, in the last few years, to get a better handle on my own personal and business finances, is a book by the title of Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. Now, Mike is a friend of mine. He was on my podcast. I've been blessed enough to meet him, interview him for my Growth Experts podcast. Brilliant guy. He talks about a very fundamental and simple system for managing for cash management, not only on your business, but on your personal level. You'll always have money for taxes. You'll always have profit and savings. You'll always make sure your expenses are paid. It's just a very simple system that I highly recommend. Okay. So those are the 7 rules to become a freight broker millionaire. So if you're a first timer here, or you've been sitting on the fence and you've been debating on whether you're going to become a freight broker or freight agent, or you want to get some training, check out freightbrokerbootcamp.com, the most cost-effective, comprehensive online freight broker training program available on the internet. Been around for over a decade, trained over 8,000 students, and we offer a 60-day, 100% money-back guarantee. So make sure you check that out if you're curious. Really appreciate you being here.